Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Perkins, a board certified OBGYN, and today we're talking about, is bleeding after ovulation a sign of pregnancy? Now, you may have just ovulated, you may be having some spotting now, and you're wondering, is it me? Am I pregnant? What could be going on? Well, we're going to talk about all of that in today's episode. So stay tuned. We will cover ovulation bleeding, implantation bleeding, and the difference between the two, as well as other reasons why you may have bleeding after ovulation. So let's dive right in. What exactly is ovulation bleeding? Now, before I start and really dive into this topic, I want to kind of set the premise a little bit and talk about what your menstrual cycle typically is like and how to determine if you're ovulating or not. So let's start with the first day of your period. The reason why we start with that day is because the first day of your period is actually the first day of your entire menstrual cycle as well. And this is where you will start your timing, or for you to understand and know how long your cycles are, you want to start with the very first day of your last menstrual cycle. Now, if we're considering a 28-day cycle, typically at day 14, which is 14 days after the first day of your menstrual cycle or your period, on day 14 is when you're expected to ovulate. Now, this isn't always a perfect world, right? Sometimes it could be on day 13, sometimes it could be on day 15. Or time and your body's time isn't necessarily always the same. But the important thing here is to know that midway, or 14 days approximately before your next period, will be the time frame where you should ovulate. Now, ovulation comes. You feel all the signs, you see it in your body, you're just like, yes, this is it. What now? Well, hormonally, when your cycle begins, your body will start to release a lot more estrogens in your system. And the reason why you have this estrogen is to build up the inside lining of your uterus to prepare for a possible fertilization and for pregnancy to begin inside of the uterus. So think of this as the perfect way for your body to make the inside of your uterus livable. Okay? Now with that, as tissues building up with this increase in estrogen, at the point of ovulation, estrogens peak and then stop. Now, you must be wondering, well, do we not need to continue preparing the inside part of my uterus for a possible pregnancy? You do. But what happens at the point of ovulation is that your body wants to prepare to accept sperm and to cause fertilization to happen, and then continue with this process of maintaining a pregnancy. So during that time frame, what happens is that progesterone will come in and start to take over. And progesterone, I consider to be the pregnancy hormone. It is probably one of the most important hormone of pregnancy. I'm going to say probably, and one of the most, because there are a lot of different hormones. But initially, especially, progesterone is important. Progesterone comes out after ovulation and helps to maintain the inside lining of the uterus, preparing things for pregnancy. Now, at the point of ovulation, when this estrogen level starts to go down and the progesterone level starts to go up, sometimes that tissue on the inside of your uterus that has been filling up or building up and getting thicker since your menstrual cycle began, it is now at increased risk of bleeding, just a little. And this is what is called ovulation bleeding. Oftentimes when people experience this, which by the way, only 5% of females in the reproductive age range would actually experience ovulation bleeding. So it's not very common. If you are one of the 5%, within a day or two of ovulating, you could have a very, very, very light spotting. Now, this could be light pink, a very light red, and it's usually not anything that requires you wearing sanitary pads. This is not a period. If you're having period-like bleeding, you definitely need to speak with your provider, your OBGYN, whoever you see. It doesn't matter, but whoever gives you reproductive care, you need to see them because that is not normal and is not considered to be ovulation bleeding. Now, how is this different from implantation bleeding? Implantation bleeding occurs after pregnancy has happened. So think of this. You ovulated around day 14. Egg and sperm came together fertilization happened, they start replicating and traveling from the fallopian tubes all the way to the uterus. Once this conceptus, the combination of egg and sperm and all their reactions, once that moves towards the inside part of the uterus, it needs to really truly establish itself into this thick tissue that's been built up by estrogen prior to fertilization happening and really secure a place for this growing pregnancy to occur. Now, as this conceptus buries itself into the inside lining of that uterus, imagine this. There are thousands of blood vessels in this thicker tissue. And as this conceptus is pushing and making its way into the inside lining of the uterus, it may cause some bleeding because it hits or comes close to some of those blood vessels inside of the uterus. So implantation bleeding is just that. As the pregnancy implants itself inside of the uterus, it does so close to a blood vessel, and you will get some bleeding. You may be wondering now, well, Dr. Perkins, does this happen all the time? And it doesn't. And it's important that we really kind of pause here and talk about it, because you may be thinking, well, I had a pregnancy before and I didn't have that issue. Or maybe I've had bleeding every single time I've been pregnant. I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, listen, Dr. Perkins, they say you don't have a period while you're pregnant, but I did for months before I really truly knew that I was pregnant. And yes, that can happen. And the reason is because implantation bleeding may be very similar to that of a period. The difference usually is implantation bleeding does not last the length of a period, and it's not the same intensity as a period would be. It doesn't come with as much volume as what a period would be. However, when this occurs, it is usually around 8 to 10, maybe even 12 days after ovulation. And the reason is it really takes about 5 to 7 days for the egg and sperm combination to move from the fallopian tubes into the uterus and establish itself. So when this happens, this is not at the point of ovulation. This is a week plus after ovulation has occurred. Now, I do want to mention that implantation bleeding is a sign of pregnancy, and it is also very, very common. Approximately about 24% of pregnancies will have implantation bleed. Now, if you're not pregnant and you had a bleed post-ovulation and you're wondering, well, I'm not pregnant, I know this for sure, why did this happen, or why does it keep happening? There could be other causes as well, such as having an ovarian cyst that's ruptured. Ovarian cysts are in your ovaries. They're not inside of your uterus. The uterus is responsible for bleeding and pregnancy. So why would you have bleeding if an ovarian cyst ruptures? Well, because we're hormonal and everything in our pelvis is based on hormones as well. And oftentimes when the ovaries develop a cyst and it grows and it ruptures, it is responding to the hormonal changes in your body. And so those same hormones can be changing and causing your uterus to spot a little as you go through these fluxes and changes in your hormones. Another reason could be hormonal imbalance. What does that mean? Well, we have a ton of hormones in our bodies. We have over 50 of them. And these hormones are kind of like interwebbed. They are working together in a closely knit relationship. And with that, when one hormone goes down, another goes up, and vice versa. And so a hormonal imbalance means that your hormone, say estrogen, for instance, may be higher in comparison to the progesterone, which works closely with it, but they should kind of be opposites, right? And so if your estrogens are way too high or your progesterones are way too low, or vice versa, you can have a hormonal imbalance. Now, your uterus responds to hormones. If your estrogens are high and your progesterones are low, you may not ever have a bleed. If your estrogens are really high and progesterone pops in and estrogen drops, then sometimes you can have a bleed. And so a hormonal imbalance at any point can cause random and spontaneous bleeding, even around the time of ovulation. Another reason could be birth control. If you are taking a new birth control, if you've changed the dosage of your birth control, or even switch types of birth control. You can have random bleeding, especially around the time of ovulation. What I find and I see most commonly is that if you're on the pill, for instance, I've had patients who in general take their pills at the same time every day, which you ought to. That's exactly how we recommend that you do this. But sometimes what happens is that instead of you taking it at 8 o'clock this morning, you took it at 12 noon because you forgot. And now, while most pill packs will give you some kind of range where you can be a little bit late, sometimes what can happen is that if you take your pill a little bit too late, hormonally, your uterus gets a little bit confused. And it's confused because it's like, when you stopped taking the pill, you were telling me to have a bleed, you took it a little bit later than you should. So I thought you were telling me that you wanted me to have a bleed or a period. And so your hormones internally kind of turned on to signal a period, but you didn't really want that because you took a pill, and so your uterus gets confused. Do you see how that could be confusing for your uterus and your body? This is why we encourage that you take your pills at the same time every day. Now, this can be very similar to the patch. It could be very similar to using the ring. It's not as typical for using progesterone-only birth control, but the short of the story is that this can definitely happen when you're on birth control. Could bleeding directly after ovulation mean that you are pregnant? That's a good question. Typically, it isn't. And the reason is when you ovulate and say sperm is in your system and is waiting for that opportunity to create pregnancy, when that happens, that sperm getting to the egg is a very, very fast possibility, right? Sometimes the sperm can get to the egg in 5 minutes. It happens pretty quickly. Now, once pregnancy has taken effect and is underway, we typically do not have bleeding, especially at that time. And so the likelihood of this bleeding being due to pregnancy is, I'm going to say, slim to none. Spotting is by far not the thing that you should look for to know whether or not you're pregnant. There are other signs that can be much more significant. Breast tenderness being a common one, starting to become way more fatigued than you normally would be on any given day. You may start to have a lot of nausea that leads to morning sickness. And if you are aware, morning sickness is that feeling where you either need to eat something to settle your system or you feel like very nauseous and start vomiting quite a bit. We call it morning sickness because the majority of the time this happens in the morning, but typically morning sickness can happen at any time of the day. But that is a true sign of pregnancy. Now, unless you've missed a period or you've gotten a positive pregnancy test, if you're having any of these symptoms individually or independently, don't necessarily think that you're pregnant, okay? You want a true sign or to truly know whether or not you're pregnant, and that's with a pregnancy test. So what do you do if you're having this random spotting, which is not a period, and it's right around the time of your ovulation? Well, the first thing is don't panic, okay? It is okay. It is all right. And I say that because it is usually not a sign of something truly bad. Now, it could be the sign that you could have something growing inside of your uterus, like a polyp, which is very common. Sometimes it could be hormonal, like I mentioned before. And sometimes if it happens just once, it's truly harmless and we might not ever find a reason why it's happened. But what I want you to take away from this is if you have this random spotting, I want you to see a provider. It is time for you to be seen. It's time for you to talk to someone about the symptoms and the things that you're experiencing. And it's time for you to do things like get an ultrasound to take a look at your system. You may need to do some laboratory work to check your internal system hormonally. And so you want a provider to be on board and to help you through this process. Now, I hope this information today has been truly helpful for you. If you have other comments or questions or concerns, I'd love for you to leave a comment below and I'll respond to you. And we can share here as a community talking about these very truly important topics. Now, I have a gift for you for listening today. If you'd like to learn more about your body and your hormones and what to do in these kind of scenarios, or even how to improve your body so that it is the perfect haven for pregnancy, I have a free copy of my ebook, Hormones Don't Lie, and I would love to send that to you today. For that to happen, just click the link below and I'll send it right over to you. Thank you so much for listening today. Again, I'm Dr. Perkins, and it's always a pleasure for me to have these talks with you because together we learn and together we're stronger. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.